Waiting for your exam results? I know it can feel awful. And in today's message, I'm going to talk about how you can find some peace even while you're in the midst of that waiting. Stick around, we'll have more to say about that in just a moment. I'm Jackson Mumey, the owner and founder of Celebration Bar Review. And for the past 25 years, I've helped thousands of bar takers, people just like you, to make their next bar exam the last bar exam. If you want to know more about how we do that, check out the links on this page after this video. You know, I've been doing a series, re-recording a series that was very popular that I did many years ago. It was called Exam Peace. That was an interesting term because most people aren't at peace with the exam. And we've been talking about in Exam Peace some ways that you can find some peace when you're studying for the test. But this particular message, while it's in the Exam Peace series, is a little bit broader in context because it's really focused on this period of time that we're in currently in which we're waiting for bar exam results. And this is a very hard time to find peace for a lot of people. You know, we're just on the outside of bar results being released. And when we come into the heart of that period of time that will last a couple of months, it is pretty intense for students, obviously. So my primary focus today is to talk to those of you who are waiting for your results. But if you're not yet in that process, if you're studying for the exam, I think it's helpful to at least understand what this process will be like because it will happen to you one way or the other. And I think it's helpful to know ahead of time rather than afterwards, gee, what's that going to feel like and how should I manage it? Now, this message is in part a recap of an email that I send after virtually every exam to everyone that's registered in our course. It's probably the single most commented on email that I send in our entire series of emails. And I think the reason for that is that it touches a chord in a lot of people. And I apologize that I'm going to quote so much of it verbatim, but I want to get the wording right because I think it resonates with so many folks. So here's what I typically write to people, and this message will be going out to our students from the last exam in just a few days. It's been a few weeks since the bar exam, and in a short time, results are going to be announced. And given that time frame, this seems like an appropriate opportunity to address a question that I'm often asked, but I rarely have the right words or feel like I have the right words to answer. For many of you who are waiting for your exam results, the great relief of simply getting the test over with is enough, and you probably won't think much more about it until the envelope or the email notice arrives with your results. And I think that's a great outlook to have, and if that describes your situation, then the rest of this message may be totally meaningless to you. But for a number of other people, this period of time, this waiting for results, is something of a struggle. It's kind of a mix of what ifs and what abouts, and there's general anxiety and certainly a fair amount of neuroses. Now, as you wait for the results, if that's your situation, you should be comforted by this. Most of our students in Celebration Bar Review will pass the bar. I can say that with a great deal of confidence and over 25 years of experience. But obviously, if we're talking about big jurisdictions like California or Florida or New York or Texas, many people, in fact, a majority of bar takers will not pass the bar. And that's obviously deeply troublesome. Nevertheless, whether you're going to be one of those who pass or fail, the question that I think anyone who fails is going to be asking is, why did some people succeed and others did not? Now, for a few people, the easy answer is, the poor results, are going to be pretty obvious. You didn't study hard enough, you didn't spend enough time studying, or there was a crisis at home or at work that diverted your attention before the bar exam. In a few cases, there will be those students, undoubtedly, who blame their bar review for providing a deficient course. You can certainly do a search and find critics of every bar review, including ours, out there on the web. But there are an awful lot of people, I think, who have responded very positively to our course and the word of mouth over the years. So I feel pretty good about that. But I recognize that there are people who simply say, I failed, it must be the bar review's fault. They will point the blame at anyone and everyone else. Maybe they'll blame the examiners for writing an unfair test or having a cut score that's too high, or blaming the examiners for grading in a way that seems irrational and unfair. And truthfully, I can live with all those responses. I think there's a measure of validity in all of that. I don't have an expectation that everyone who takes the bar exam should feel like the exam is fair or that every bar review course, including ours, is doing everything that it should and could, or that we've done everything that's humanly possible that people would expect, because there's always a higher level of expectation, I think, than we can meet. So I'm okay with that recognition of some people will pass and some people will fail. It breaks my heart when it happens, but I get it. The real problem for me comes with those who do exactly what we ask of them to do. Certainly in our course, I would say this. These are people who make the full effort and they still fall short. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem just. Now, a few years ago, I read a wonderful book by an author by the name of Philip Yancey. Many of you are familiar with Yancey. This book was called Rumors of Another World. And Yancey is a terrific writer. He's done a number of books with a Christian-based theme. They're provocative and thoughtful books, I think. But I wouldn't pigeonhole him as being purely a Christian writer. In Rumors of Another World, Yancey seeks to explain, in one part of the book, some of the contradictions of why, in God's world, it seems sometimes so seemingly messed up. And I think we could clearly expand that beyond the bar review these days. Yancey notes the people of faith, and by faith, I simply mean the God of your understanding, but people of faith are called to live in two very different worlds. There's the city of God, as he calls it, that's unseen. And then there's the city of this world. That's the visible world that we know and that we function in. Now, in the city of this world, passing the bar exam, taking that new position, receiving the accolades of becoming a member of the bar and the prestige that comes with that is nothing less than huge. I get that. And certainly in these harder economic times and in these times when it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a law degree and debt is big, this is a big deal to pass the bar. It's getting your life back, and we've talked about that. Passing the bar is the gateway for many people to paying their bills, to opening the doors in their career, to making a difference in your life and the lives of people around you and in your family's life. Maybe just moving someplace you've always wanted to live. My point is, it matters that you pass. And yet, there's this other thing, the city of God, which seems to call people of faith to renounce those very same things: prestige, money, material trappings of success. And that is a dilemma. Now, I've had students who've talked to me after every exam and say, why me? Why can't I pass? I tried. I studied so hard. I did everything I was supposed to do, and nothing works. And that is a gut-wrenching moment for anyone in our industry. Now, in my early years of teaching the bar review, I tried at those moments to console the students who failed. But what I began to realize is that there were no words of consolation I could offer, and I personally felt totally helpless. But here's where I diverge from the pity party that might exist at that moment, that it's natural to join at that moment. I don't believe that my God deliberately places obstacles or troubles in anyone's path. But I do believe that God allows those obstacles to remain there in order to grow our trust in that higher power, in the God of our understanding. Now, if you're a regular watcher or reader or listener, if you've been through our webinars, I've told you about some of my students, and we've shared their stories in videos and interviews. But one of my favorite students was Tina Hoover. She was a student who failed the Cal bar 20 times before she finally passed. I worked with her to help her pass in the last couple of times that she took. And frankly, she kind of wore me out at the end. There were days I was so frustrated that when I saw her phone number on caller ID back in those days, I wanted to let the call go to voicemail. But I didn't. And Tina persevered. And she never lost her faith in the God of her understanding or of what we were doing to help her get through the bar exam. We instituted with Tina the FourStep approach that we teach now to everyone. And here's the cool part. What Tina did was what ultimately caused her to pass, and then became the really foundational elements of what we've taught literally thousands of people to do since then. Now, here's the weird part of this. When I tell Tina's story every week on our webinar, people just sort of go, oh my God, how could that be? But not a month goes by that I don't receive a note from someone somewhere in the world who saw Tina's story on our webinar, on our website, communicated with her, and was touched by her humility and her faith. She's still in practice today. Tina probably impacted more lives with her failure on the bar than all of my other passing students might have combined. You know, we do these interviews with students who have overcome amazing challenges to pass the bar. And sometimes it's so extraordinary that it takes your breath away. I had a student who took the Florida bar 8 times and failed. And he came to us and he passed on the first try with us. And he then went and decided to spend a good deal of his time helping those students who'd given up to persevere and pass their exams. I had a New Jersey student who failed the test for the very first time 14 years ago and then passed 14 years later, came back and took the exam and passed. And his tears were one of joy and gratitude, not for passing, but for the strength to keep trying. In our staff, we have people who have extraordinary experiences and share those experiences. And in our Facebook group, they come back year after year, exam after exam, to share with our existing students. My point is that when I hear stories like those, I'm humbled when my students and others that have come in contact with me share those stories with me, and they allow me to share their stories with other people. You see, sometimes there's a reason for a failing result that we simply cannot understand at that moment. And I could go on and on with the incredible stories from so many of our students, and you can find them on our website in the case studies and testimonials page. And I hope you do that if you haven't looked at them. But here's really the point of this message. If you took the bar exam last time, when your results arrive, and if those results are favorable, congratulations. It's awesome. It's great news. It's wonderful. I want you to be a kind and patient and gentle member of our profession. I want you to bring honor and glory to the God of your understanding by the way you carry yourself as a lawyer. But if your results were unfavorable, then you should know this. You were created for a purpose that God prepared beforehand for you to do. And for those of you who have a biblical background, you know that that comes from the Bible in Ephesians 2:10. The point is that the setback may be for reasons that seem very clear at that moment, but they may be also incredibly obscure. They're rarely obvious. They may be completely hidden from you. I very much doubt that Tina found much good in all those consecutive failures that she had, or Jose after 8 unsuccessful tries, or our New Jersey student after 14 years of failing. But they ultimately turned out, all of them, to do things that were extraordinary in their lives and in those they touch going forward. So no matter what your results are, as they come out, I would encourage you to seek God first, to trust the God of your understanding, even in the midst of the signs of disorder that might cloud your vision. In other words, as Yancey would say, to be as aware of the city that's unseen as the one that's visible. The Apostle Paul, for those who are Christian, wrote pretty ironically, I think, from a jail cell, we don't yet see things clearly. We're peering through a mist, and it won't be long until the weather clears, and we'll see it all then. I think that's a pretty good statement, don't you? I mean, I don't know what you'll see when the mist of the bar exam clears and your results come out. I hope it's really good stuff. But if it's not, I want you to know that it's never the end. It's not the worst thing that could have happened, and it can be resolved. If you're in our course, we'll work together to help you figure it out and to move to the next step. And for those who are listening to this message later and not in our course, maybe it's the time for you to reach out and contact us to see if we can help you. But the point is that the result, if it's not favorable, might mean something quite different than what you expect or what you think. So that rather than seeing it as an end, I hope you'll consider it to be something like a beginning of a new season for you, a season of exam peace.